नबियों में रहमत लक़ब पाने वाला, उसी से है इस्लाम का बोलबाला। वो सरचश्मे नूर फतह मुबीन है, वही मशअले राह अज़्म यक़ीन है। उसी से हमारे दिलों में उजाला, उसी से है इस्लाम का बोलबाला। वो नबियों में रहमत लक़ब पाने वाला, उसी से
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Radio Ramadan 87.7 FM. I'm your host Zubair Akram with my guest Sheikh Ridwan Muhammad. Today, 8th of Ramadan, 30th of March 2023. Iftar in Glasgow today is going to be at 7:57 p.m. Iftar is going to be at 7:57 p.m. And this on 8th of Ramadan, Thursday, inshallah, we will continue with our tafsir, or can I say a conversation, a discussion around the surah of the Quran that we've chosen for this month, for this year of Ramadan, is Surah Alaq. So let's go and kind of listen to the first few ayahs of Surah Alaq, and it'll be over to Sheikh Rizwan after that to expand on some of the meanings of what we've been discussing in this month.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق.
Recite in the name of your Lord who created.
خلق الإنسان من علق.
Created man from a clinging substance.
اقرأ وربك الأكرم.
Recite, and your Lord is the most generous.
الذي علم بالقلم.
Who taught by the pen.
علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم.
Taught man that which he knew not.
كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
No, but indeed man transgresses.
أن رآه استغنى.
Because he sees himself self-sufficient.
إن إلى ربك الرجعى.
Indeed, to your Lord is the return.
أرأيت الذي ينهى.
Have you seen the one who forbids?
عبدا إذا صلى.
A servant when he prays.
أرأيت إن كان على الهدى.
Have you seen if he is upon guidance?
أو أمر بالتقوى.
Or enjoins righteousness?
أرأيت إن كذب وتولى.
Have you seen if he denies and turns away?
ألم يعلم بأن الله يرى.
Does he not know that Allah sees?
كلا لئن لم ينته لنسفعا بالناصية.
No. If he does not desist, we will surely drag him by the forelock.
ناصية كاذبة خاطئة.
A lying, sinning forelock.
فليدع ناديه.
Then let him call his associates.
سندع الزبانية.
We will call the angels of hell.
كلا لا تطعه واسجد واقترب.
No, do not obey him, but prostrate and draw near to Allah.
शुरू अल्लाह के नाम से जो बेइंतहा रहम करने वाला और रहीम है। पढ़ो ए नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम अपने रब के नाम के साथ जिसने पैदा किया जमे हुए खून के एक लोथड़े से इंसान की तख्लीक की। पढ़ो और तुम्हारा रब बड़ा करीम है जिसने कलम के जरिए से इल्म सिखाया, इंसान को वो इल्म दिया जिसे वो न जानता था। हरगिज नहीं, इंसान सरकशी करता है इस बिना पर कि वो अपने आप को बेनियाज देखता है, हालांकि पलटना यकीनन तेरे रब ही की तरफ है। तुमने देखा उस शख्स को जो एक बंदे को मना करता है जबकि वो नमाज पढ़ता हो, तुम्हारा क्या ख्याल है? अगर वो बंदा राह रास्त पर हो या परहेजगारी की तलकीन करता हो, तुम्हारा क्या ख्याल है? अगर ये मना करने वाला शख्स हक को झुटलाता और मुंह मोड़ता है, क्या वो नहीं जानता कि अल्लाह देख रहा है? हरगिज नहीं, अगर वो बाज ना आया तो हम इसको पेशानी के बाल पकड़कर उसे खींचेंगे, उस पेशानी को जो झूठी और सख्त खताकार है। सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम। Uh, this is Surah Alaq, 96th Surah of Quran, which we have chosen to discuss for this month of Ramadan in 2023 with Sheikh Rizwan Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Sheikh, yesterday we left this conversation with a rather, maybe I would say, a tangent. I'm not sure if it's directly connected, but it was an interesting conversation, which is that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and all Anbiya at large, is it Kasabi or Wahabi? Meaning, you attain this station because you have worked hard, you have identified your call, that this is your call for your life. And then you start developing yourself, knowing with some intuition, with some kind of feeling that this is what you are destined to do. Or Anbiya were chosen to do the task, and then they kept themselves on the path which kept them, or which put them to, they conform to the standards of prophethood. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's the conversation. And if I remember correctly, I don't know if you quoted Ibn Khaldun. I'm not sure if Ibn Khaldun in his Muqaddimah, he also kind of dabbles into this, that is it Kasabi and Wahabi, and people say that Ibn Khaldun is of the opinion that even Nabuwa is Kasabi to an extent. It's not Wahabi. It's a bit of this and a bit of that. It's not firm.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if that's the reason why you asked the question yesterday, but Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So this issue, in terms of the revelation of the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ being chosen, we know that there's ikhtiyar, and I kind of think mentioned yesterday that the Prophet ﷺ has numerous names, and one of the names is Al-Mustafa, which is the one that is pure and chosen and free of blemish, but also is the one that's chosen because of that. So it's so when you choose something, you know, part of it you're choosing. Like if you go into you're going to do iftar today, you go to the supermarket and you choose the best fruit or the best produce. You know, the reason why you choose it is not, it doesn't become good because you chose it. It is good and therefore you chose it. And so if you take the example of the Prophet ﷺ being chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, part of it is that he was the best of creation. He was the best, most suited, the best lineage, the best geographical location. You can actually extend this in numerous ways. Geographically, he was not in the center of civilization. He was on the outskirts, close to the civilizations of the world that were essentially, even to this day, we understand them to be pivotal in the development of human reason and thought and ideas generally. You know, not to underestimate South American civilizations or Aboriginal civilizations, but there's no competing civilization that was axial, you know, pivotal. And the Prophet ﷺ wasn't in the center of it. He was on the periphery of it, connected to it, to the point that he could travel on caravan journeys to trade with the people of those civilizations. So the Prophet ﷺ, before prophecy, he was at touching distance almost. If you think of when he's going to with his uncle to the trade routes to Sham, for example, he was in
Syria,
touching. Yeah, he was in touching distance of that. He was in touching distance of all the trade routes that were there, the Byzantines, the Sassanid Persians. These were the great civilizations that had a constant struggle between themselves. And so he, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, was placed in a specific location where he was perfect to be able to touch those civilizations from a distance, but be pure enough and unlettered enough. Remember, we're talking about the Prophet being a Nabi al-Ummi, the unlettered prophet, enough for there to be a very strong case for him to be a miracle in of himself. The Prophet was a miracle, him walking. Aisha said, radiyallahu anha, he was kana khuluquhu al-Quran. His embodiment was the embodiment of the Quran, ethically. So he was a miracle himself, a miraculous individual. And so from one aspect, he was chosen by Allah and placed in a specific place. He didn't choose his parents. Allah chose his parents for him. But then, if you think of this interesting thing, that the Prophet ﷺ, he's meeting his taqdeer with tawfiq, because the taqdeer is Allah has decided from pre-eternity that he's the prophet, final prophet of God. And the tawfiq is that he is doing things that are sinking in with what Allah wanted him to do. And what is chosen.
I mean, this is interesting. Just interjection here. So tawfiq, the definition of tawfiq, just to refresh my memory, the tawfiq means when your will is in sync with Allah's will.
Yeah, God's
or
will.
Your action.
Your action and your life and your everything is in sync with not what God wills, but what God wants. Is
Yes.
Probably because in Aqidah they do have a kind of slight differentiation. It's what Allah would be pleased for you to do, and it is going in the direction of what Allah is pleased for you to do, and that's tawfiq. You know, imagine you're cycling. Imagine cycling up a hill. Imagine cycling down a hill. You know, a nice gradient down or a steep gradient up. Khidlan and a lack of tawfiq is to go up a hill, and your whole life is like that. The qada and qadr of Allah is and His pleasure is in one direction, you go in a complete different direction. For it to go smoothly, you go into a direction which Allah has already indicated is the path. But the difference with prophets is that they cannot, obviously, they don't know that they're prophets, but everything comes together to put them in the right place at the right time so that they meet their qada and qadr, they meet their decree, ready. So when every single prophet, even the Prophet Musa, alayhi salatu, despite the fact that he was in the most difficult of situations, you know, he met his taqdeer, his decree of being a prophet of Allah. The Prophet Isa, every single prophet of Allah meets their decree. And so with the Prophet ﷺ, what's interesting is that the beginning chapter, which is Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, actually just, I think if you think about the words, read, O Muhammad, which is asking you to do kasb, which is asking you to acquire something. You have to do something. Allah's not downloading the Quran upon him without him engaging with it. Iqra is for the Prophet ﷺ to read, meaning recite. But that's kasbi, isn't it? That's you acquiring something, it's you doing something, it's you striving as a human being. You're acquiring his acquisition, kasb. And then the other thing is bismi rabbika, in the name of your Lord, which is wahabi. It's like you will not be, O Muhammad, be able to read and recite unless you open it with the key of bismi rabbika. It's like this is like the kind of the meeting point of kasb and wahab. It's like the meeting point of the two oceans of human volition and choice and ability coming into unison and connection with what God decreed and wants. And it's almost like, when in your own life, if you ever get to the point where you and what you're doing is in complete unison with what God would want you to do, you've attained the key to paradise. That's like the secret. That's like the water of life, if you'd say eternal life.
Yeah.
Because Jannah essentially is, people always talk about living forever and elongating their life. And then I was listening to a podcast recently about, old age being nothing more than a disease, but you can actually placate and postpone and, they were saying not eradicate, but almost eradicate, because it's a degeneration, and you can, you can reverse that. But in reality, Jannah is exactly that, and Jannah is your ability to live forever, because our belief in Jannah is that is khalidina fiha abada. It's an eternal, continuous existence. And so, in our own lives, leave aside the chapter we're at, if you're able to acquire actions and decisions and intentions that are in unison with what God would love you to do, would want you to do, not what God has decreed, because God decrees everything, the good and the bad and the ugly. Everything is by, nothing happens except by the decree of Allah. Earthquakes, famines, humans have a part in it, but it's human. Like, for example, in Turkey, this tremendous earthquake that took place is part and parcel of the natural form of the planet that happens. But humans choose to remain on places where there is tectonic activity, and they're in that sense kasb as well. So one of the amazing things about this chapter is that it ties in the issue of acquisition and human choice and volition and freedom with this idea that part of it cannot be done except with this special key. And it's almost as if it's like in the context of Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, it's as if Allah is saying you will not be able to read and recite and convey this message and fulfill this prophetic legacy that you have unless you do it with our aid.
So there's a command. There's a command to do, but there's also a command to recognize that you can't do it without me.
Exactly, perfect. That's better than how I expressed it, because I always struggled in Ramadan to express ideas. But that's exactly what it is. You will do it, but you will not be able to do it without this key. And what's the key? It's not. You need a whole team of people to teach you. It's not that you need a whole institute that teaches recitation and tajweed and maqamat and exegesis of the Quran. And nowadays no one person can even teach the Quran properly, because there's so many sciences, language and grammar and sarf and balagha and maqamat and tajweed and qira'at and all these things. It's very difficult to find one person that's mutqin in all that. When yet the Prophet is going to be a person that's going to be telling people about inheritance and international relations and everything in detail for everyone to analyze until the end of time. He's being told you cannot do that except by what? Bismika Allahumma, ya Allah, with your name, which is nothing. I mean, what is it? You're saying it. And so for us, it's quite an interesting that a lot of our, our teachers, may Allah grant them the best place in Jannah, they always use every small thing, Bismillah, even if it's inaudible. You could tell they were saying every single small mundane thing was Bismillah. There was something of a connection to this chapter. Everything with Bismillah.
So Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. So Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi. I mean, this is a concept that is quite it's a soft concept which you need to relate it to your life. How do you benefit, or what difference does it make when you say Bismillah? Why is it so?
Yeah. So what you've done is you've given over, and what you've done is if you understand it properly.
Yeah.
Remember, if you understand it properly, the proper understanding is I'kil fatawakkal. When the Prophet, the person didn't tie the camel, the Prophet said, tie your camel and then rely. So it's like, President Erdogan does this all the time. He opens like nuclear factories and airports and all these big projects. They've done all the work, and he says Hadi Bismillah. He cuts the ribbon and he says, okay, in the name of Allah. Meaning what? You've done you've done everything, but you know that it will not reach its aim, it will not reach its purpose unless it's done for the right reasons. And it's like that's the point where he's focusing everyone's intention on what the purpose is. And so that's the same thing here. Iqra, it could just be Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram. Read and your Lord is generous. It's not that.
No,
It's
it
Iqra
is
bismi
Iqra
rabbika
bismi
alladhi
rabbika
khalaq.
alladhi khalaq.
Yeah, it's not saying read and your Lord is generous, missing the whole thing of the Bismillah. It doesn't it makes completely different meaning. It's the thing that we have to then do is, okay, you strive, you plan, you work, and then you hand over the honor of blessing it to God. Like, this is the best we have of Allah. Make it fruitful, make it beneficial. And if you do that every single aspect of your life, like you drinking a sip of water, Bismillah. It's like you got the water, you ensure it's clean, and you've done due diligence in earning it and so on and so forth in the right way. And then you drink it, you're hoping that the consuming it and what comes out of the strength from consuming it, if you're breaking your fast, when you're drinking it, you think Bismillah, you're praying essentially that, okay, the energy and nourishment I get from this and the food that I eat is now going to project me into something that pleases God. Because you can recite for other reasons.
It's not just an act of your speech to your tongue. Your heart needs to be in sync with it. Your understanding needs to be in sync.
Training, isn't it? It's a question of training, because it's very difficult for you constantly to be in your heart, to be in understanding exactly what you're saying. If you say Bismillah in the name of Allah and you understand the majesty of Allah at that moment, and if you're doing it every single point, it's very difficult. But the thing is, our religion is such a beautiful religion because it lets you off with a lot, because it says essentially if you do small things, every part of your body, subconsciously and consciously, physically and metaphysically, will be going in the right direction, because your tongue is saying it, like your mind is saying it. Yeah, it has an effect. It's like using, when the Prophet used to do the count the what we call the salawat al-Fatimiyya after the prayer, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah. Yes, he used to use his fingers, sallallahu. And one of the blessings of scholars mentioned of that is that he used to touch the fingers in a way that the blessing of saying it would extend to the fingertips.
Subhanallah.
Do you understand? So he gave sadaqah to the fingertips.
And it's true for us?
Yeah, absolutely, because you're saying it, you're thinking it, so your mind is having neurologically, your mind is being, we're creating neurological pathways. This is one of the things that neurology tells us about the way that we speak and what we do in certain situations. In a state of tranquility after prayer, if you say something, it creates pathways, which, inshallah, the whole idea, I would imagine, would be that, when you're about to die, the last neurological activity of your body is La ilaha illallah. Do you understand? Like, that's the most common thing it's used to saying. Not, oh my God.
Are we saying that this
oh
repetition, the rationale for this long adhkar and kind of almost mukashafa, or you're sitting in some kind of place where you're focusing for an hour or so, is there a rationale based on this, what you've said, that your mind gets in sync with your heart and what you are saying? So practice.
Yeah, your mind, everything, and not just mind, heart. I'm talking body. I'm talking just sitting. Like, your body is imprisoned in a place by your mind and your decision making to say you're stopping. Like, your body, the body can do so many different things. We're going to stop here. We're going to put down our tools. And the effect of that is obviously in decision making, in fortitude. Like Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, it was said about him by Hafid al-Bazzar, I think it was, that after praying the Fajr, he used to sit and do the repetition, the word of Al-Fatiha until Ishraq. So Al-Fatiha, which we all know, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, continuously all the way through. It's not as if he was practicing it because, just in case he made a mistake in prayer because he forgot it. It was because the meanings, he wanted his body to submit, his heart, everything to submit to that. And when he was asked about it, he says this is a nourishment that gives us the energy to continue. So something as simple as Al-Fatiha, which everybody knows, Ibn Taymiyyah used to do it constantly. This is an innovation of sorts. But the reason he's doing that is to make the body submit its functions to something else. And this is why I think for us, it's very important that we cannot be either or. We can't be people that are Kasbi or Wahhabi. You know, this is a heresy that Islam came to rectify. That you can't just claim everything for yourself and think if it doesn't go right, you're to blame. It just wasn't meant to be. Meaning, it wasn't written by Allah. Not that I failed and I'm hopeless and I'm a disgrace to everybody. No, if you try, and you rely on Allah in doing it and you say Bismillah, that's sufficient. And the other thing is just to sit under a tree and, to do yoga meditation. Because even Maryam, alayhi salam, when she was in a state of giving birth to the Prophet Isa, alayhi salatu wasalam,
yes.
She didn't sit there in like a yoga pose and say, oh, Allah, you didn't, just like bring the food, bring the dates, bring the water. Allah says, Huzzi ilayki.
She shook the palm tree.
Yeah, I mean, shake the roots of the palm tree to saqit alayki. They will then fall upon you. It will come down only if you do it, not sit there and we will give them to you, which happened when she was just sitting in the cloister in Jerusalem, worshipping, and everything came without her doing anything. And then when she needs Allah to give her things free and without her striving, Allah says, no, I'm sorry, you have to strive.
Even Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam, she had to strive to give birth to what was
she had to give. Yeah, absolutely. To give birth to the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Prophet Isa, who had no father, in a situation where she was helpless in the midst of summer, thirsty, with no nourishment, no nutrition. At that point, that in her life, the whole life, that she needed divine help, Allah says, no, I'm sorry, you need to
strive.
You need to acquire it. And this is why Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, he writes a book, Kitab al-Kasb, on the book on acquiring things. It's about trade, actually. And he writes this narration. He talks about this.
Sorry, could you repeat the name of the author?
Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani. He's a student of Imam Abu Hanifa, the main student of Abu Hanifa, the main collator of his madhab, the person who authored the books on the Zahir madhab.
Translated in English, Urdu?
Actually, I think it is being translated. One of my friends, Dr. Adi Seti from Malaysia, I believe he did translate this. I think he gave me a copy as well. But I've got the Arabic. Yeah. I'm sure it'll be in Urdu as well, because Muhammad ibn Hassan is the most important name in the Hanafi madhab after Abu Hanifa. So if they haven't, you should tell the ulama in Pakistan to translate it. They might benefit for the economic policy at least.
Kitab al-Kasb. Oh, that actually brings us to a very interesting segment after this ad break. People who are listening, this is 8th of Ramadan, 8th day of Ramadan, 30th of March 2023. Iftar in Glasgow is going to be 7:57. I'm your host Zubair Akram with my guest Sheikh Ridwan Muhammad. A short ad break, and inshallah we'll be right back after this.
Sound for the soul.
Awarded the UK's Best Muslim Charity of the Year, Muslim Global Relief, bringing hope to life for 20 years in over 40 countries around the world. Every water pump you helped to install, every needy person you helped to feed, every orphan child that you sent to school has a powerful impact on people's lives. Let us continue to make change. Make a 100% Zakat donation today. Visit muslimglobalrelief.org.
रास्ते कितने ही मुश्किल क्यों ना हो, जब कोई साथ दे तो मंजिल मिल ही जाती है। गजाली एजुकेशन ट्रस्ट गुज़श्ता 25 सालों से लाखों बच्चों को स्कूल में ला चुका है। आपकी मदद से पाकिस्तान आगे बढ़ सकता है। हर बच्चा पढ़ सकता है।
अगर आपको या आपके किसी जानने वाले को टाइप 2 शुगर की तशवीश हुई है या टाइप 2 शुगर के खतरे से दो चार है तो हमारी टीम NHS ग्रेटर ग्लासगो एंड क्लाइड में आपको मजीद सीखने और अपनी शुगर को कंट्रोल करने में मदद कर सकती है। हम आपको मुख्तलिफ खिदमात की मदद से हमायत कर सकते हैं और ज़रूरत पड़ने पर इंटरप्रेटर भी फराहम करते हैं। हमारे पास उर्दू, पंजाबी और अरबी में भी वसाइल मौजूद हैं। मजीद जानने के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट www.nhsggc.scot T2 डायबिटीज़ हब पर जाएं या हमारे हब पर कॉल करें 0141 531 8901।
Radio Ramadan 365 Sound for the Soul. Radio Ramadan 365 Sound for the Soul.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق.
Recite in the name of your Lord who created.
خلق الإنسان من علق.
Created man from a clinging substance.
اقرأ وربك الأكرم.
Recite, and your Lord is the most generous.
الذي علم بالقلم.
Who taught by the pen.
علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم.
Taught man that which he knew not.
كلا.
पढ़ो ए नबी अपने रब के नाम के साथ जिसने पैदा किया तुम्हें जमे हुए खून से, एक लोथड़े से इंसान की तख्लीक की। पढ़ो, और तुम्हारा रब बड़ा करीम है जिसने कलम के जरिए से इल्म सिखाया, इंसान को वो इल्म दिया जिसे वो न जानता था। शेख, अस्सलाम वालेकुम again. Yes.
Walaikum salam.
Okay. Just something has clicked, right? These five ayahs are exactly what we have been talking about. I don't know. It was intentional.
Well,
but
what do you think we were talking about?
I didn't realize. What I've just realized it now. That Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, right? So read in the name of your Lord. Khalaqal insana min alaq. Who has created? And then God is Kareem for the fact that He has taught us knowledge through Qalam. So kasab. And He has taught us something that we did not know. He taught us something that we did not know. And you mentioned kasab, and you mentioned economic policy. And that reminds me of Shah Waliullah. So Shah Waliullah's work, his entire work, what I understand, the summary of it is economic policy. How people deal with each other in terms of economy, money. Most of his work is around that. It is so important.
Are you asking or are you telling?
I'm asking. I'm
Well,
trying to validate what I think I know.
Well, Imam Shawli Dahlawi is a polymath, so where he did, amazing work on the Quran and its kind of translation. He did amazing work on the reintroduction of hadith into the subcontinent scholarly circles, which actually is one of his most momentous introductions. Like the fact that the subcontinent was very poor in hadith studies until he wrote about the tabaqat of the books of hadith, splitting it between Imam Malik's Muwatta, Bukhari and Muslim, the highest level, to the Sunan, to the collection of Ahmad, and then the kind of Tariq work. So he introduced this whole importance of hadith, spirituality as well. He refined and introduced Akbarian metaphysics, Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi's metaphysics. But your issue of economics is important because when he looked at the rise and fall of Islam, or the reason for the fall of any community, he put it down to economics, actually, not to religious, kind of being religiously astray.
Yeah.
You religiously astray, you go astray from Jannah. Let's get this clear. You could be the most, I was reading, what was I reading? Watching something. It was about the fact that in the next 20 years, NASA plans to have a kind of presence on Mars. In other words, they're going to have outposts in Mars. Elon Musk is also, the whole purpose of his expeditions is to have people living on Mars. And so that you would say, well, that's success. That's where we need to be. That's where Muslim nations need to be. We need to win more Nobel Peace Prizes. We constantly are being told by Islamophobes and anti-Muslim hate preachers, constantly told how few Nobel Prizes Muslims have. There is an aspect of civilizations which develop and have strength, which is based upon those things. But for us, ultimate benefit, ultimate success is hereafter. Okay, but Shawli Dahlawi, when he mentions the fall of civilizations and nations, he says economics is at the core because it's to do with cronyism, it's to do with a lack of transparency, it's to do with evasion of tax payments. And I was reading today, actually, just 5 minutes before we went on, about the Premier League apparently being involved in not paying billions in taxes because of a double contract clause that they have with agents. And so, the moment that your economy is not transparent, everything falls apart, because everyone has to eat, everyone has to drink, everyone has to buy a house, everyone has to buy clothes. Like, there's basic human necessities. And when we talk about a cost of living crisis, the reason why that is important is because it's a cost of living. Like, you cannot live. You can't heat your house. You can't give your children food to eat. This is not in some developing country. This is in Western Europe, where children are having to live in houses where the damp conditions lead to respiratory ailments which cause their death in the 21st century in Western Europe. This is what we're talking about. So the way that civilization is brought crashing to the ground is when there's no economic justice, when the rich get richer and the poor are structurally, tied into being poorer constantly. There's nothing they can do about it. And so Shawli Dahlawi, you're right in that sense, that in terms of civilizations, he places a lot of, almost all emphasis on the rise and fall of civilizations on economic transparency or lack thereof. And so, so kasb is such an interesting thing that, our religion is one that is kasbi. We have to strive and struggle. And even if you look at the issue of Iqra essentially means to recite or to read. For the Prophet ﷺ meant more properly to recite, because he was doing it from his heart. But for us, it's from something, which means you need to have teachers, you have to have students, you need to have institutes, you need to have structures, you have to have curriculum, you have to have books, you have to have a whole infrastructure of education. And so from Iqra also comes everything we have today. If Elon Musk is trying to get to Mars, it's because Muslim scholars analyzed the celestial realms to map out where everything is, because they needed to find out when the prayer times were. So Muslim civilization was always a civilization that tied in knowledge of the hereafter with this world.
But that's interesting, that even the seeking of knowledge was to fulfill an act of deen, worship.
Yeah, science, like Ramadan. Why do we have fights in Ramadan?
Yeah,
like the beginning of Ramadan. It's because we have, mashallah, our Muslim scholars are so well equipped with the knowledge of astronomy that they can have intricate discussions about the birth of the moon. I'm joking, but it used to be that they could have hour-long discussions about the diffraction of the sun and the moon and all these kind of things. But that's not the case anymore. It used to be. The reason why they wanted to map out the celestial world was to come to some understanding of When do you stop eating, for suhoor? Or when do we start praying dhuhr, for example? It was as it is now. It's almost to the millisecond exactly what Muslim scholars, calculated it to be. And so what they passed it down through Muslim Spain, and it's well documented through the universities that were set up, copied. And this is an interesting thing about it. It's Professor Maqdisi. He wrote a whole PhD work and then books on the fact that every university in Western Europe was mirrored on universities in the Muslim world in terms of literature and arts and also science. So, medicine, study of the natural world was copied and pasted from the Muslim world. Study of arts, literature, languages, and the liberal arts were copied and pasted from the Muslim world. And then they took it and ran with it without the restraints of morality. Essentially, what happened is that they cut any moral element from it, and they basically, pushed the boundaries more and more. And Muslims remained, they still played by the rules of morality in some way. And this, I think, is something that's quite important, that, Muslims are, as a ummah, in a materially less advantageous position because they started to play the old game they were playing, whereas the West generally start to play another game. It's like you're both playing drafts. Drafts is very simple rules. Every piece has the same ability to move. And imagine you're playing with somebody and they're playing drafts, you're playing drafts, and it's fairly even. If you're a better player, you'll win. So Muslims are winning the majority of human civilization. And then all of a sudden, you give, something extra to the other side and they start playing chess with you. So all of a sudden, all your pieces are being taken in, seconds. But the agreement was we would play according to the rules of draft. So, the agreement was we shouldn't be playing this other game because the thing is, this other game which the West is playing, it's we do it and we see it and we don't see it. It is going so fast in its hedonism and its quest for progress that it's going to implode environmentally, economically, socially, psychologically, spiritually. Already we know that, but economically, in terms of the environment, in terms of human interactions, all this is going to, I would say, completely disintegrate. And this is something that everybody knows. It's just that you don't talk about. You talk about cycles of economic boom and bust, but there's a limit to how much debt you can place upon the earth, because the debt has to be financed through extracting more resources from the earth. That's the basic economic bottom line of it. If you want to know what it is, it's exactly that you have to get more productivity from the earth, which is not capable of doing. It's like making a person in the 80s work a heavy shift manually every day. At some point, that person is going to die because of the amount of pressure you placed upon their shoulder. And so I think the big thing is in kasb and wahab, this discussion is, if all you do is kasbi and you just acquire and you acquire, at some point that's going to come back and really haunt you, because Allah says in the Quran, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, that destruction and fitan have spread within the skies and the earth on account of what human beings have acquired, done, not what God has given them. God has given them everything. If you look at the other aspect of this, all the blessings that Allah has given us, the Quran enumerates them again and again within the heavens and the earth and the oceans. Everything is given for your use plentifully as a blessing. And what do? This is Wahhabi. We don't create the ozone layer. We don't create the oxygen levels. We don't create the plenteous water supplies and the fruits and everything. We just acquire. Like we might plant them.
Sheikh, so I mean, there is this thing, right, where there's something in our psychology, in our psyche, Muslim psychology, that overemphasis on Wahhabi, and there is less on Kasabi, and then that's the result that we are witnessing just now. We become complacent. Everything is given. Taqdeer is what determines. Tawfiq is given to us sometimes, and sometimes we don't have tawfiq. And this is impeding the progress of human mind, impeding the progress of a nation. Whereas West, they're single-minded, they're straight track to progress, no matter what. We need to progress. And there is no wazifa, there is no kind of sitting down and just doing zikr for like next 2-3 hours. Whatever is needed to progress needs to be done. Whereas a Muslim mind is in a state of confusion all the time.
Mhm.
I mean, to be honest, my 5 episodes with you is that confusion. I'm trying to understand, what do I need to do
Mhm.
to progress, to achieve? What's my duty? I feel that I can never compete with people who are less aware of religion.
Mhm.
More you get aware of religiosity, religion, you're trying to understand your deen. I've heard from you, why is GDP important? It's not. So what's the big deal if you have less GDP, or if economics of a country is not up to the standards of the Western standards? But yet we have Shah Waliullah, who's writing, his core writing is economics.
Mhm.
So there is this confusion the human, or the Muslim mind is in. You can't rely on all the tools available. You don't access. There's a debate: do you access bank loans? Do you not? To what extent? Is it greed? Is it progress?
Mhm.
So how do we address this? How do we understand this?
Yeah, so the thing is that this is a question of balance. It's a question of what is the balance that we should be aiming for between spiritual health, community well-being, which is something that nowadays in the West, that a lot of the most advanced nations in the West, like Sweden and Denmark, talk about a lot, which is social contentment, social cohesion, um, satisfaction in work and the work-life balance and all these things. And they've realized that the whole idea of GDP, like the Chinese model, is all about increasing GDP and having an economy that's constantly growing at 5%, 6% a year, for example, per annum. Now, there's a contrast there, because on the one society is going for production and economic indicators that are,
Mm,
according to standard economic theory, to be, achieved. And in fact, even those, you can't grow your economy too fast.
mm,
So there's you can't go beyond 10, because that your community will and your society will not be able to keep up in the production. It overheats the economy. So there's all these things. You have to have a balance. And so the balance is that in Islam we have this thing that it's basically you're doing it for a purpose. Like, why are you increasing your GDP? Is it to alleviate poverty? Is it to give people opportunity? Is it to create infrastructure for health and social care? Is it, essentially that's what it's about.
mhm,
So, okay, if you have massive GDP and you have a whole, like in America, for example, a whole substrata, which is like 25 to 30% of your population living hand to mouth in debt.
mhm.
I mean, this is in debt, this is below hand to mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
Healthcare and social deprivation, living essentially in places that are no-go areas. Is that the kind of society you want? So it's a question of, in Islam, you have this, at least you have this idea of balance, which is you have
Mm,
this understanding that there's a time for your spirit and there's a time for your body. And then the balance is to do it with justice. And that's will create
Sorry, you said time. There's a time for your spirit and there's a time for your body. But
yeah,
then
absolutely.
finding a balance by a Muslim mind who is not kind of well equipped with this knowledge is the issue here,
Yeah, it's
isn't
a
it?
difficult. I agree, because when a person says they need to be, religious, it goes overboard. It gets to the point where it actually is detrimental to
Mm,
their body and their relationships with their family and friends and their productivity and their reliability. It happens like that because
yeah.
part of it is that your religiosity should actually mean that you equate everything and balance everything, the rights of other people. And so the worship is in serving. Our worship is in being a good, manager, or a good employer, or a good employee. So all these aspects are actually very, very important. That's what religion tells you to do. It informs how your worldly actions will be better.
Have we lost the tools?
Yeah, because if you're
As
more
a civilization,
religious,
we have lost the tools.
Yeah. If you're more religious, it should tell you how to do good business. It should show you how you give back to your community, how you recycle your wealth, how you invest your wealth. Because, even like if you talk about zakat is all about redistributing of wealth by not hoarding wealth. And the thing is, just a complete sidetrack which came to my mind. Zakat is not to give 2.5%. The message of zakat is not to give 2.5%. The message of zakat is to tell people who have wealth that they have, you shouldn't just have it. You should invest it. You should keep it moving in your circles so that people are employed through your wealth. If you keep it, it will decrease. That's the message of zakat. It's not, Muslims in Ramadan need to pay 2.5%. It's telling them, look, if you have to pay 2.5%, essentially there is something wrong. Because the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet never paid zakat.
Because
it said that Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, never paid zakat.
Allahu Akbar.
And he's very famous for being a trader. Salahuddin Ayyubi, I read from one of his biographers, never paid zakat. Because his wealth was not that he found some kind of loophole. Their wealth was constantly moving, so they were never obliged to pay zakat. Like it was constantly It never came to a point where they, if they liquidized all their assets, they would be, Imam Abu Hanifa would be a millionaire. But it was the fact that everything was engaged in creating wealth for other people. That's a religious life. I mean, to be honest, that's a religious life.
But important concept. You said creating wealth. So wealth creation is something which is required, and to create wealth is not earning a livelihood. There are two different concepts. You earn a livelihood and you create wealth. They're two different mindsets. Are we saying that Imam Abu Hanifa had a mindset of wealth creation?
Yeah. I mean, what came out of it was he earned a livelihood. Like he sustained himself. He was able to, like Abu Yusuf, his most famous student, he bankrolled his education, even though his mother came to Abu Hanifa complaining and said, "How dare you take my son away from working and earning a living for us?" And he said to her, "Your son," and he was about 12 years old, he said, "Your son will sit in the court of the Khalifa and he will eat sweet pastry from turquoise plates." And she was saying, Abu Hanifa has definitely lost his marbles. Okay. So, but Abu Hanifa said, "I'll pay your son every day to attend the classes." And Abu Yusuf later on, when he was during the Abbasid period, he was in the court of Harun al-Rashid, and Harun al-Rashid asked or ordered some food to be brought, and amongst that was turquoise plates with, exactly what Abu Hanifa described. He not prophesized, he kind of, you could say prophesized the fact that would happen. And Abu Yusuf was laughing in the court of Harun al-Rashid, and Harun al-Rashid said, "What's wrong with you? What's nothing funny here?" And he said, "I just remember what Abu Hanifa said to my mother." So, so Abu Hanifa was there to, earn a living as a byproduct of creating wealth. And so kasb is one of these things you have to acquire. You can't sit under a tree and expect. You can't do a shabby job and expect. You can't cut corners and expect the best. You can't make things and make them substandard and expect that everyone will, it will take over the market. You can't, because that's not how the world works. The world works based upon the evolution of ideas and the kind of small incremental changes that things are to things that are made to make it better. I think the best video, we had a joke in Syria where I think it's one of my Arab friends from Syria actually said this to me, that the Arabs do research and development on how to make baklava.
Okay.
So it's like the next shop will do a different type of baklava with a different type of pastry with different mix, and then that will be research and development of the next generation will be passed down. And whereas the West is doing R&D on how to kill people, and he was saying it.
No, but there is R&D. Okay, there is R&D in all aspects. I mean, the health system of the West is unmatched, unparalleled. I would say it's when you start living in places which is not in the West, you realize what was there.
That's systems as well. That's systems. That's not even research and development. That's systems. You have systems in place that process like a patient, how to process a patient. Yes. Like in outside the West, when somebody's ill, the big problem I think, and this is actually to do with CUSP as well, is to do with they don't know how to process a patient efficiently, and so they have amazing. You'll know they have amazing hospitals in Pakistan.
Yeah,
and in Turkey they have the same thing. But the issue is not that. The issue is of processing systems. And that's why I said, I think, did I say in this program or somewhere else? Yeah, I might have said it in this on program or somewhere else. The British, when they conquered the Indian subcontinent, the way that they conquered it was basically through systems.
Yeah.
Planning through systems. The people, the local people didn't have systems in place to rule. The British just brought a system. That's it. An efficient system to rule people and rule them with an iron fist. And so
Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot of blood. Recite, and your Lord is most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know. Final few moments of today's iftar reflections with Sheikh Ridwan Muhammad. This bit of philosophical conversation. What does it mean to me as a person who's about to open my fast in next 10 minutes?
Yeah, so I think this chapter is all about, what foot do you put forward first? Like, how do you start? When you do something, what's your first intention? What's your first move? What's your first thought? And this chapter is telling you that whatever you do, whether you feel it's impossible to do or whether it's something that's beyond your capacity to do, you start with invoking the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because without that, whatever you attempt to do will essentially either not succeed or will happen without having given the fruits that you wanted. So the cultural aspects of our faith are such that even our children, we inculcate within them the idea of Bismillah. You start something, did you say Bismillah? When you eat, did you say Bismillah? The Prophet said that every single action that is not started with Bismillah is cut off. Why is the Prophet saying that? He's just getting you in the habit of getting you to understand that kasb is not sufficient. You have to tie it in with consecrating it, giving it blessing, giving it meaning beyond its mundaneness. Like you're eating for breaking the fast. That's a mundane thing. You just need sugar and a bit of liquid. But for what? For what? And when you're fasting, you're meditating over the quality of Allah. That is, Allah is Samad. He is not in need of anything. I'm in need. I need to eat now to get on with the time after iftar. So Samad is in Arabic. Classically, it was Imam Mahalli actually mentions this. That is man la jawfa lah. That is the one that has no stomach. Didn't need a stomach. God didn't need stomach. Seems a very strange definition.
Allahu Samad.
Yeah, it seems a strange definition, but essentially is that, because if you need a stomach, you're tied. You can't just walk into the forest. You can't just do whatever you want. You're tied. Time, place, relationships, work, everything. There's something that's tying everybody down. It might just be relationships, it might be love, it might be guilt, it might be unseen things, but everyone's tied in by something. And so all the Bismillah does it cuts away all those shackles that people have, because it gives meaning, it gives purpose to you which is beyond yourself. It's like when you say Bismillah, it's as if you're not just a small speck in the cosmos. You are now a speck which is connected to the whole cosmos. That you are important because you've connected to the one that created the cosmos. But if you just eat and drink and forget Allah, then all you are is a speck in the cosmos, which will grow biologically, procreate, be buried back into the ground, and basically dissolve. And is that the purpose of life? You know, is that the purpose of life?
Sheikh, so before we end, a little announcement. Kitabul Kasb of Imam Shabani is available in Urdu. One of our listeners have texted me. It's on PDF, and it's there. And people who are looking to read, they can contact us.
People looking to read, mashallah.
Read this book.
Allahumma ya Rabb, make us people that read.
Subhanallah. Thank you so much, Sheikh. Inshallah, we'll continue with this tomorrow.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
With another. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.